Hello and welcome to Back to Basics. Welcome everyone. I see we have several regulars in the chat. We got Hobag and James Rivera, Kiddis. Good to see y'all. Sub Vapes is in there as well. Welcome everyone. Don't forget to check out Bull City Flavors. Use DMC6. Get 6% off your order and free shipping after $75. And head over to Liquid Bond for all of your PG, VG, and Nick needs. Use coupon code Mixers Crew and get 15% off your total order and free shipping after $50. So what's going on, Russell Lewis?
Oh, work.
So I hear you got a new job this week?
Last week.
Oh, last week. Okay.
I'm on second week now.
That's right. How's it working out for you?
Working out great.
Yeah.
Way less. Well, it's work, but it's less work.
Well, he can say otherwise, so his boss might be listening to us.
Yeah.
I doubt that. No, it's a great little place to work, man. Great group of people. Everybody's real friendly. Very small company. I actually, can remember everybody's name, so that's
good.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Cool. What's up with you, Lewis?
Well, fortunately, my flu is much better. I'm much better from the flu.
Good.
And nothing much. I've been fine tuning and tweaking my Apple recipe to present it for the DMC challenge. Hopefully I'll make it public tomorrow. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, I'm thinking about coming up with something new, different.
Oh, mine is different for sure.
Coming up with another apple.
Yeah. It has apples, of course, but it's different. The profile is.
I'm thinking of all FLV mix. Maybe apple, a little bit of sweetener, and some lemon tea.
That sounds interesting.
It does. So I think I'm gonna make that happen.
Well, I've been working on a couple of different apple recipes. Nothing that I'm really satisfied with yet, but I'll come up with something.
Sure, you will.
Yeah. So, what are we going to talk about? Huh?
I was asking you, what are we talking today?
What are we talking about today? Okay. So last week we went over blueprinting your recipe, and let me throw that up right quick. I'm going to screen share this right quick to everyone. Just 1 second. Where is it? Okay, so this is what we talked about last week, recipe blueprinting. And it's just an outline on how to think about your recipe and think about it in different layers, your top layer, your base layer, and your accent layer. And so we went over that. This really just helps you look at your recipe in a different way. Instead of a whole recipe, it kind of breaks it into layers so that if you have a problem with something in your recipe, you can identify it a lot quicker. And it makes you think about your recipe more in depth instead of just picking up flavors and just start dumping them in, you know? So it helps with the recipe development part. So what we're going to talk about today is once you've done all of that and you've picked out your best layers, your best combinations, and you've put them together, and your recipe is good, but it seems like it might be lacking just a little bit. It may not be quite the way you envisioned it. So this week we're going to talk about tweaking your recipe and how to make that recipe that you blueprinted a little bit better. Just fine tune it just a little bit. And one of the main things that will cause a recipe to be good but not great is the fact that it's not vibrant. You know, there's not a vibrancy to it. There's nothing that really jumps out at you. Sometimes it may taste a little muddy, things like that. So we're gonna kind of go over some little tips and tricks for the trade on how to make it more vibrant. So one way that you can make your recipe a little more vibrant, let's just say you have a recipe that is it's just kind of bland. There's not enough flavor to it. You can take the recipe that you developed in the recipe blueprint and just turn up all of the percentages on your flavorings. Now, this don't always work because some flavorings at a certain level will max out on their flavor, and you get kind of a weird what they call muting that will actually make the flavor less flavorful. But you can try it on recipe. Just turn up the volume just a little bit. And sometimes that will make your recipe just a little more vibrant. Another trick is, let's say that you have a recipe and your base is, you know, pretty spot on. It's got good flavor, but say the top note is not where you want it to be. So what you can do is you can turn up the volume just a little bit on just your top note. That's another way to kind of tweak your recipe and get it right. Now, some recipes, and this is a common problem with new mixers. If you have a recipe, you've done all the blueprinting, you've tested all the different layers, you've put them together, and it just, when it's combined together, it just doesn't taste right. Sometimes you can, in a recipe, you can do what's called muting of flavors. And a lot of times that's caused by using the same chemical compounds that are in different flavorings. When you add them all up, it's too high. Okay, so it causes the recipe to be muted. And one way to fix this is something that I call consolidation. Okay, and I'm going to bring up a recipe and just kind of walk the people through this. If anybody has any questions in the chat, feel free to ask them. Just tag me at DIY Mixers Crew so we can see your question.
Speak now or shut up forever.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna show you this recipe that I did. It's been some years ago. It was one of my first recipes that I did. And okay, so this is a recipe I did quite a while ago called Mama Slat Cheesecake. All right. And at the time, I thought this recipe was really good. It was just a strawberry cheesecake. I think I had strawberry in it. Yeah, strawberry cheesecake. So this is a common thing when people are just starting to mix. And what they do is they're using too many flavorings. Okay, and this is exactly what I did. I put in anywhere biscuit at 1%, LA caramel at 1%, TPA graham cracker at 1%, some Greek yogurt just to give the cheesecake just a little bit of sourness. Put in some lemon lime, 4% of Cap New York cheesecake, 1.5% of JF's sweet strawberry, some vanilla bean ice cream, and vanilla custard. Now, when I mix this all up, the flavor is pretty. I mean, it's a cheesecake. It's a strawberry cheesecake, but it seems muddy, and I'll explain why. If you look at Inaware biscuit and you look at TPA graham cracker, okay, both of those flavorings share common chemical compositions, okay? So in consolidation, what you want to do is you want to look at your recipe critically and say, do I really need both the graham cracker and the biscuit in there? Okay. So in this instance, I would probably, if I was redoing this recipe, I would actually take out the Inaware biscuit and maybe raise the graham cracker TPA up to maybe 1.5%. And so that's consolidating those two flavors, just eliminating that and just raising this up just a hair. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at another aspect of this recipe. Cap New York cheesecake at 4%. TPA Greek yogurt at 1%. Vanilla bean ice cream at 2%. And vanilla custard at 0.5%. Now, those four ingredients there probably, I don't know this for sure, but probably share some common chemical compositions. And by reducing those same chemical compositions, you will make your recipe more vibrant and not as, quote, muddy. Okay, it'll be bright. You'll be able to taste the layers better in it. The simpler, the better. Okay, that's the key here. The simpler, the better. So, what I would probably do in this recipe if I was redoing it is I would probably take out the vanilla bean ice cream altogether. Okay, because it's really not needed in this recipe. Yeah, it's a good flavor, but like I say, this is consolidation. We're trying to condense this this recipe down to a simple recipe. The vanilla custard, probably don't even need it either. Okay, so we end up with the New York cheesecake and the Greek yogurt. I like that in cheesecakes just because it gives a little bit of sourness to the cheesecake part. But we could probably drop this down to like 0.5%. All right. So LA caramel, I don't know if that's really necessary as well. If you wanted to leave that in, you may be able to drop that down to, maybe a 0.5% or something like that. But that would make your recipe only about 6 ingredients. That's what I'm talking about when it comes to consolidation. And believe me, it will make your recipes more vibrant and more flavorful so that you can taste all those different layers. Lewis, do you have anything to add to that?
Man, you said so well, I'm speechless.
Oh, you are? Okay.
It was your explanation was perfect. Nothing I can add there. It was perfect.
Okay. All right.
Outstanding.
Well, hey, I've always wanted to be perfect, so there we go. So yeah, consolidation. Take that recipe. If it doesn't have that vibrancy and it tastes muddy, some recipes, you have to up the percentage to get a more vibrant flavor. Sometimes if your percentages are too high, it will mute your recipes. So sometimes you need to bring the parts down that you feel are too strong or too muted. Sometimes you need to consolidate. I always consolidate my recipes after I formulate them. I always take a look at them and say, okay, what can I cut out? What do I not need? What is not essential? And that has helped me more than anything. One other thing that you can do is now a lot of people may disagree with this. Okay, so just keep this in mind. This is my opinion and my opinion only. A lot of recipes that I have created when I first started making recipes, I didn't really add sweetener to my recipes, and they were bland. There was just something about them. It just didn't. They just didn't pop. And when I started using sweetener to give it that little extra kick, now I'm not talking about 1% super sweet or 2% uh, uh, TPA sweetener. I'm talking about just a little bit of sweetener. I normally use if my recipe needs a sweetness to it. I mean, and most of my recipes are dessert recipes. I'll use like 0.25% super sweet, cap super sweet, and that's all it needs to just lift that recipe up just a little bit to give it more vibrancy. And that is basically what tweaking is all about. Tweaking your recipe. So if you have blueprinted your recipe, you picked out the best layers, the best flavor combinations, you put them together, and you have consolidated, and you have looked at your percentages, whether you need to raise them, lower them to bring out that vibrant flavor. You've added your super sweet, and it still isn't right, then guess what? You have to start over. Start over with that blueprint. Pick different flavor combinations, different percentages. And, all this is really kind of a trial and error kind of thing. I mean, you can speed up the process somewhat, but if that recipe at the very end of everything that you do does not match what your profile that you're going after, and you're going after that profile, then the only other option is to start over and try something different. And believe me, I have done a lot of try-overs and do-overs. Just because I've been mixing for a while doesn't mean I can just whip something up and it tastes good the first time. Sometimes you can. Most of the time you can't.
Sometimes you get lucky.
Sometimes you get lucky. That's right. So yeah, those are just some of my tips. Do y'all have any other tricks or tips that y'all want to talk about?
Well, I can say that one thing is for sure. Like till a year and a half ago, most of my recipes had at least 15% flavorings. Now, they don't even have 10%. And I think my recipes now are much better than they were a year ago.
Yeah, I agree.
Because now I have much more mixing experience than I had a year ago, and now when I develop a recipe, I go through some steps, and at the end I always do what Steve was talking about, and I always try to make it more simple. Well, maybe not as simple as the addicting how he calls it, the 1 2 3. Okay, not as simple as that, but I always try to make it simple. Reduce the number of ingredients in there, and most of the times reduce the amount of flavorings. Something else that I do in the last phase of the recipe development, I try to fine tune the percentages. Try to turn go around maybe 0.5% more of one ingredient or 0.5% less of one ingredient. Make several batches, compare them, taste those batches side by side. That's why I have two heavilies, exactly built the same way, so I can taste two batches side by side and decide which one is better. There's one trick that I always do whenever I use, for instance, that two flavors that are quite similar. They are Flavor Arts Vienna cream and the TPA's Bavarian cream. Um, if you ask me, which one do you prefer? If I single flavor test it, I like Flavor Arts Vienna cream much more than I do Bavarian cream. But the funny thing is, I always do two batches, one with Bavarian, one with Vienna. Sometimes the Vienna batch is better. Sometimes Bavarian turns out better. Most of the times I don't know why. I still don't know why in some cases Bavarian is better and in some cases Vienna is better. But you should do things like this. Make several batches um, similar to each other, test them side by side, and go with whichever one you prefer.
Lewis, when you speak, are you on full screen on your end?
No,
Uh, can you change that?
on full screen. What you mean?
Well, somebody was saying in the chat that the screen was stuck on Russell. Can you click on active speaker? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Yeah. So yeah, that's another thing that you have to take into consideration is that not every flavor will be different in every recipe. Okay, just because Bavarian cream works in one, don't mean that it's going to work in another recipe. That's something that you really have to play around with. Some flavors just clash. You know, there's just no, separately. If you make a layer that's just delicious, and then you make another layer like a top layer that's delicious, but then when you put them together, there's just something about it that just clashes. You know, so you have to keep that you have to take that into consideration. So that those are just some of the pitfalls that a new mixer may run into. There was one other thing that I was going to talk about. It kind of slipped my mind. Um, hmm. Oh well. Um, Russell, do you have anything to add? Any tips and tricks that you do to tweak a recipe?
No, I mean, I pretty much do what you guys do. I was in the same boat as Lewis, like a year and a half ago. All my recipes were really high percentages, and when I came on with you guys kind of, pushed me down that path, to where I started diminishing those percentages. I mean, I'm no expert, I'm just now really getting the gist of the layering and really getting the gist of the consolidation and stuff like that. I think most of my recipes now, some of them are still a little bit on the high side. When not really, because they tend to stay between 9 and 12. You know what I'm saying? So that's a lot better than a year ago when I had some that had like 16 and a half or something like that. You know what I'm saying? I try to keep, like you said, I try to keep my my sweetener down to 0.5 or lower.
Yeah.
The recipe. I know I made the 3-2-1 recipe like a week and a half ago or whatever, and because I needed 1%, I used that sweetener at 1%, which is probably killing my coals in that particular recipe. But I needed it at 1, to keep in track with the 3-2-1 thing. So
yeah, I remember what I was going to talk about. Last week we talked about the different layers and multi-layered recipes, kind of complex recipes. These things are really for more experienced mixers to do. Now, but you can still use that blueprinting to do simple, just 2 or 3 flavor recipes. And I really encourage people that are new to mixing to stick to simple recipes. Uh, Complex recipes does not mean complex, flavorful vapes. All right, it doesn't. That just because it's complex doesn't make it better. Some of the best recipes that I have ever tasted are very simple recipes. Take, for instance, um, Fear's Cardinal. It has three flavorings, right? Three. That's it. You know, it won what, second or third place last year in the on Wayne's best recipe of the year. You know, I mean, it doesn't have to be complex, people. Keep it simple. The simpler that you can. You saw that this recipe that I did when I first started. Let me bring it up here again. Just let me show it to you. If I can find it. I mean, this is crazy. This is crazy. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 flavorings in it. All right. You do not need 9 flavorings to make a strawberry cheesecake. Trust me. Okay. You don't need to. That's where a lot of new mixers get in trouble. Using too many flavorings that have, and they almost always share similar components, and that causes muting, okay, of your recipe. Number 2, using your flavorings too high. If you use your flavorings too high, a flavoring has like a starting point and an end point, okay? There's a point that a certain flavoring starts to have the flavor that it's supposed to have. This is true with most flavorings. And then there's a point that comes when the flavoring actually starts to taste less like that flavor, and may even taste like nothing. I mean, you take for instance, what's a good flavoring? Just trying to think here.
What you're trying to say?
FLV, apple pie filling.
Okay, so apple pie filling, flavor at a certain percentage, that's spot on. But if you take it over a certain percent, what percent would you think that it would start muting itself, Russell?
Well, I used it all the way up to 5, and I think it'd probably go higher than that before it actually started doing some weird stuff.
Yeah. So
I'd say probably maybe 7 on that one before it actually started going south.
Yeah. So one flavoring that I've tried is I think it's FA fig, and at like 1.5%, it's got a pretty nice fig flavor, a sweet. It's kind of like a candy fig or something. It doesn't really taste like fig, but it's a nice sweet flavor. But if you start going over 2%, then you start getting off notes like floral notes. That's another thing that a lot of flavorings, when you over flavor, they'll start to have a floral kind of a note to them. That's a telltale sign that you need to come down on those percentages. So
peach is another one.
Yeah, peach.
Like that.
In fact, most fruits.
Yeah, most fruits.
Yeah, fruits are weird.
Yeah, bananas. If you use TPA banana and you go over, I would say probably 1.5, maybe 2%, you're going to start to get a really funky chemical banana runts taste. So what I'm saying is that every flavor has a like an entry point and an exit point that it just doesn't have flavor. So you're trying to find that sweet spot in between. So using too many flavorings, over flavoring, too complex of a recipe. Say you're trying to make a cherry cheesecake with nuts, whipped cream, topped with ice cream. Okay, that's just it. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be that complicated. You're going to run into a lot of problems when you start putting that many layers in a recipe. So just keep it simple. Keep your flavorings at a reasonable percentage. They don't have to be extremely high. And Another thing when it comes to flavorful vapes, this is something that we really haven't talked about on this show, but the devices that you use may have a lot to do with a recipe not being vibrant. So if you're using something like a Juul or a vape pen or something like that, when you mix up a recipe and you vape on it through something, a device like that, you're not going to get all of the nuances that recipe has to offer. You're just not going to get it. So if you're developing a recipe for something like that, keep that into consideration. You may actually have to go higher on some of those percentages just to taste them in those type of devices.
And I think that was my biggest thing is up until recently, everything I vaped outside of development was out of a Griffin, which is a tank mod. And then I would test in a Mad Hatter until I got my drop. When I got my drop, now I test and vape out of my drop. So everything tastes spot on to me now because how I tested it is the same way that I vape it after the fact.
Right.
Or I would have those same problems. I would make something. I think that's why my percentages were so high because I have to make them high just to make up for that flavor that I'm missing. So I'd start low and then end up having to tweak it high. But now, since I've got this drop and everything, it's staying pretty much the same.
Yeah, I was in the same boat. For a long time, I used the Griffin 25, and it's a good tank. It's probably one of the better tanks as far as flavor goes. But when I started using a dripper, my recipes changed dramatically. I did not have to use such high percentages. I could taste every single layer so much better. So depending on what you're vaping with, you need to adjust your recipe to that device that you're using. That's always something to keep in mind.
Steve, just let me say this. I always test my recipes on an RDA, on an RTA, in mouth to lung device. Now I'm using a mouth to lung RDA. I always and the nuances are different. For instance, tobaccos. That's why most people or lots of people that use that are mouth to lungers, they vape tobaccos because tobaccos suit very, very, very well on mouth to lung devices. But if you vape it in a more airy atomizer, the flavor is different. Nuances are different, and you keep that in mind. If you're only mixing for yourself, okay, you should test it on device that you are using on your daily vaping. But if you're developing recipes to give away to your friends or whatever, or even sell juice, then you should test your recipes on different devices because you don't know the people you're are giving or selling your juice where they're going to vape it.
Yeah.
Hey, Steve, we had a question from Subs earlier, a little few back here. He was saying he was asking about additives, and he asked, "What about saline?"
What about saline? I have never used saline.
I did about saline. I did, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, I've heard people that have used it. That they say that it adds saltiness, but honestly,
I don't get any saltiness from it. The only thing it does, it ruins your coils.
Yeah, I think it's a hoax, guys. Really, that's the thing about flavorings. There's a couple things that juices probably will never have. Number one is saltiness, and the next one is
effervescence.
Yeah, because
yeah.
guys, I don't know how much y'all know about salt, but salt would probably be a bad thing to introduce around some burning metal.
Absolutely, because I know in my real job, my day job, that if you heat salt up to very high temperatures, now I'm talking like over 1200 degrees and stuff, it actually turns into a very toxic acid gas. So that's why I suggest not vaping salt. I don't know what it does at lower temperatures, say around 400 or 500 degrees, but I don't think it would do anything good.
Yeah, because
So go ahead, Russell.
Draways, I don't have beer nets, so I don't know if it's salty or not. Do you guys have?
It isn't. It isn't salty. It isn't salty.
Yeah. Okay,
the thing that's more salty, and it isn't salty, but the flavor that reminds more about saltiness is the flavor red salted caramel, and it isn't salty.
Yeah, it does. I think trick your palate into thinking that there might be some salt in there. That's about the closest one. Hey, Black Mama, what's up, man?
What's on, man?
What's up, everybody? How's it going?
Pretty good, pretty good. Glad you could join us.
Thank you. Sorry I'm joining in so late, man. I've been having like a back problem all day and get it situated, but might have to go to the doctor and everything.
Oh man, I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah. Sorry to hear it. I hope you get to feeling better, man.
Thank you.
Huh.
Yeah,
we'll have to have a conversation with Fresh about this saltiness thing.
Yeah. So, so Black Mamba, we've been talking about tweaking recipes. Last week we talked about blueprinting and defining your layers, describing them, picking the right flavors for those different layers, and then mixing it up. And what we've been talking about today is when you've done all that, and your recipe still doesn't taste right, that's things that you can do to fix that. One thing is that your recipe may not be vibrant enough. You can add sweetener. You can change the percentages on your flavorings. You can do what's called consolidation, which is going through your flavorings and picking out flavorings that have similar chemical compositions and deciding, okay, do I really need that particular flavor in there? Because what happens is if you get the same chemical composition or the same chemical components in different flavorings, and you combine all those together, it increases that chemical. And if you have too much of one particular chemical compound, it can cause your recipe to be muted and taste muddy, and you won't be able to taste those different layers in there. So that's a couple of things that we were talking about.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so we got some questions in the chat here. I know I haven't been ignoring your questions, guys. I just now getting to them. So Subvape's got a question here. I got a load of relatively cheap one shots ages ago and decided to try them out. They need a good tweak to get them vapable. I don't know what to throw at them. I don't either, man. I mean, without vaping them myself, I really don't know what to tell you there. But you just
have to mix them and take good notes about what you feel is missing.
Yeah. I don't know what one shots that you're talking about, but try to mix them at different percentages. I know most one shots will have a recommended percentage to mix them up at. A lot of times those percentages are set to kind of a medium, because the makers of those one shots don't know whether you're going to be vaping them in a tank. You don't know whether you're going to be vaping them in a pen or a dripper. So if you're using a dripper, I would suggest probably mixing it a little bit weaker than what they suggest. If you're doing it in a pen, maybe mix it just a little bit higher. If you're doing it in a tank, that's probably spot on for what they recommend. If you think that it needs a little more vibrancy, add a touch of sweetener to it. That might help. So there's just a little advice.
What if you like actually know the profile of a one shot and you go back and blueprint your own flavor to make it your own, not like steal somebody's flavor, not go and get someone's flavor and then post it up on ATF or anything like that and call it your own. I'm saying get it and then reformat it.
Oh, so you're saying, say like if somebody puts out, say if somebody put out a one shot of my boss reserve, everybody knows what that recipe is. They can mix it themselves.
Yeah.
But you get the one shot and it's like, something's not quite right in it. Then you could go absolutely look up that recipe and throw it in your blueprint. You know, put all the different components in the base, the top layer, the accent, and change it some. Tweak it. Maybe up the banana some if you want more banana. Maybe decrease some of that AP to get some of that. Some people say that they get like a pretty strong throat hit with that AP. Maybe bring that down just a little bit. That's absolutely 100% viable way to do it. Now, if you put it up on all the flavors or ELR, there's nothing wrong with that. If you changed it, hey, that's your recipe. It's not mine. But most people would like to think that you would say something like, this is based on somebody else's recipe. You just give them credit, for what they've done. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so
I think
Astral Martin.
I think there's no such thing as profile theft.
No. I mean, if there was a such thing as profile theft, there would only be one strawberries and cream and not millions.
Yeah, for sure.
So I mean, everybody does some type of strawberries and cream. Profiles are free game. That's if you see somebody that does a profile and you want to do that profile, take that profile and make it better than theirs.
Well,
that's what we're all trying to do, make stuff better.
Better or suited to his taste.
Well,
yeah, exactly.
It could be a problem if you have the same exact everything, you know what I mean? And then there's definitely something going on with that. You know what I mean? If you have
sure.
the same exact percentages and everything.
Yeah. I mean, there's that, and I've seen that. That's kind of frowned upon, but mixers aren't stupid. They can look at a recipe and say, well, he took this from so and so. So you're not going to fool people into thinking that you come up with it. People will know. Okay, so Astro Martin says, can I go through another one of my old recipes and show the consolidation process? Sure, I can do that. Okay, so here is a recipe that I did.
Let's go to the archaeological part of the show.
Yeah, let's dig through this motherfucker. Okay. So this is a recipe. This was a challenge, sort of a challenge, or like a homework assignment that Wayne Walker gave out. It's been back last year sometime. I think it was early last year. And he said try to do something with a cookie dough. Now, this was before Flavora came out with their cookie dough flavoring. They were getting ready to make it public. I think Wayne had gotten it, but it wasn't. It hadn't been released for sale to the public yet. And so he said try to come up with a cookie dough flavoring without using cookie dough. So this is what I did. I want you to look at this crazy ass recipe. Look at that. It's got what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. What? 11 or 12 different flavorings. That is insane. Okay, this is a perfect example of a recipe that needs to be consolidated, especially since we have some really good cookie dough flavors out now. Okay, so let's just take that body part first, the cookie dough. Okay, so the Flavora cookie
chocolate. I've never used that.
Yeah, it's okay in its right place. Like I say, this was a very early recipe that I did. So with cookie dough, you have with Flavora cookie dough, you have the cookie dough and you have the chocolate chips in there too. So let's just look at this recipe. Okay, the bittersweet chocolate, the brown sugar, the FA cookie, double chocolate clear, golden butter, pie crust, I might would keep either the Flavor West sugar cookie or the FA cookie. I'll probably keep the FA cookie actually. Take out the Flavor West cookie. Get rid of all that, every bit of it, and just replace it with Flavora cookie dough. All right, that's a perfect example of consolidation. All right, so you have the peanut butter left. This was the profile was a peanut butter chocolate chip cookie dough. Yeah. And so you'd have the Flavora cookie dough in there. You'd have Flavora peanut butter in there. I would probably keep the Flavor with sugar cookies. The vanilla custard, vanilla whipped cream. I could probably actually take that out. I probably wouldn't need that in there. So you would reduce this from 12 ingredients down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 flavorings. Okay, that's a perfect example of consolidation. It'll make your recipes much more vibrant. You'll be able to taste everything. This recipe was actually pretty good. I sent it out to several people and they really liked it. But my God, it's too complex to mix up. I mean, just for taking so long to mix up, it's worth consolidating. Even if the flavor is good, you can come up with a much simpler recipe if you consolidate. So there's that. I hope that helps, Astral.
Right,
Okay.
good example.
Okay, so let's see if we got any more questions. I'm just scrolling up here, guys. See if we have any more questions. Well, we've already answered the question about saline. Okay, well that looks like about all of the questions that I see now. So guys, Black Mamba, I know you joined us late here, but do you have any comments or questions that you have about tweaking, or have you ever had a recipe that you mixed up and it's like something's not quite right?
Yeah, I have had a couple recipes. I mean, just talking about like what we talked about last week, how tweaking is basically kind of like blueprinting, but a little bit more extra steps to it. So basically, with my gosh, I can't remember. I'm totally God, it's been so long.
That's fine.
With my blueberry lemon smoothie that I mixed up, I did a lot of tweaking with that recipe, and I'm actually, sorry, saying actually again, I'm going to be going back into that recipe now that I have more Flavora and I have Vape Train and different concentrates like that. I'm going to be going back into that recipe and reformulating it.
Yeah,
you can go ahead.
I was just going to say, just like that cookie dough recipe that I showed just a few moments ago, that was before Flavora had that cookie dough flavor, and it's a really good flavor. As time goes on and more companies start to do more flavorings, it's not a bad idea to go back to some of your old recipes and say, okay, is there a flavor out there now that is good enough that I could replace 2 or 3 ingredients in one of my recipes and simplify? That's another way of tweaking. Just because you did a recipe a long time ago, don't mean you just forget about it. Go, if a new flavor comes out, go back to it and see if you can tweak it. You might be able to make it better and simpler at the same time.
Yeah, because that's kind of what I did with with a lot of my blueberry milks and stuff like that I made earlier. Is when y'all turned me on to the Hangsons and the Molenberry, I actually went back and took out the Flavor West blueberry and didn't use the TFA blueberry extra and the bilberry, the original blueberry stone that everybody was using back then. So now the only 2 I use is just Molenberry and Hanks. That's it. And if I want to add a little bit of earthiness to it, I'll either use a little bit of bilberry or a little tiny bit of blueberry extra. They both do the opposite thing. I think one makes it a little tangier, and the other one adds that bitter skin note to it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So like you haven't washed them yet, like you picked them right off the tree. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's the only blueberries I use now. I mean, I've got a whole like 120 milliliter bottle of Flavor West in there, and I haven't touched it in probably a good 8 months.
Yeah. Yeah. So, guys, that's about all I have to say about tweaking recipes. Does anybody in the chat have any more questions, or Black Mama, do you have anything else to add to it, or anybody?
Totally off topic.
Mm-hmm.
Completely off topic. Nice haircut.
What? No, I didn't get a haircut.
You didn't? It looks
No,
different.
I just got it slicked back, man.
Okay. Looks nice, man.
Oh, thank you. You know, I do clean up pretty good. So you should have seen it before I took a shower about an hour ago. So yeah, guys, that's about all I have on tweaking recipes. Next week, I don't know exactly what we're going to talk about, but I'll come up with something. There is something that I want to say, and I hate to say this, but you know, when we first started this show, we kind of had it in mind that this series on for a certain amount of episodes, because there's only so much that you can say about beginning mixing.
Yeah.
And you know, we've gone through how to get your flavorings, how to, you know, where to get your flavorings, your PG, your VG, your Nick, your equipment, your scales, your bottles. We've gone through all that. We've gone through simple recipe development. We've gone through how to use all the flavors in the e-juice calculator, you know, all the basics and everything. And so for the last few episodes, we've been going into a little deeper concepts in mixing, like cloning, you know, layering, different things like that, going further down that rabbit hole. But there's not a whole lot more to talk about when it comes to beginning mixing. And so we're thinking about wrapping this series up in the next couple episodes. I hate, you know, I've really enjoyed doing this, but there's not a whole lot more to do except follow everything that we have done and talked about over the last, I don't know how many episodes we've done. We've done it since November last year? Is that right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
October, November, around there.
Yeah, so we've done about 16 or 17 episodes. And so, you know, I hate to say this, but there's probably only going to be just a few more episodes in this series. We're not going anywhere. We're still going to do DMC Live every Sunday. And we will probably talk about mixing techniques and maybe some beginner stuff as well on that show. But for this particular series, I think we're going to probably wrap it up in the next couple of episodes. So I hope everyone has enjoyed it. Now we'll be back next Wednesday, and I think probably what we'll talk about is recipe ideas. You know, maybe talk about mixer's block. Maybe talk about vapor's tongue. A little bit of that. I don't know. So just I hope y'all have enjoyed this.
One real quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry for interrupting again.
That's fine.
Is it possible that if I can get it to happen, can I get a special guest from the audience to come on next week?
Sure.
Since I haven't really spoken to this person, but I see this person in the comments on every live video that I go to.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Absolutely. Who is it? Or do you want to keep it a secret?
It's Ashton Martin.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Sure. Absolutely. We'll have him on. Yeah, he's been here probably since the first episode of this series. Yeah.
Hey, somebody had an interesting topic up here. Hold on.
Mm-hmm.
Sub-Apes said, what if we could talk about substitute concentrates? Like if you had to sub, you know, how would you go about lining up your picks for subbing? That would be the closest to what the mixer used.
For
Yeah,
that,
that's
So
that's a
mixing
hard one
up,
because for
mixing
that you need to know would need to know the flavor that you're missing, and if you have the flavor missing, how would you know it?
huh?
That would be hard.
Well, they got the profile sitting in front of them.
well, it all boils down to single flavor testing. Okay, if somebody has if let's say for instance somebody's using Capella Double Apple, and they've tested. They've also tested FA Fuji apple. Okay, and in the recipe they're using double apple. Well, somebody sees that recipe and says, "Hey, can I substitute that with FA Fuji apple?" Well, that mixer would have to know what both of those apples taste like before he could say yes you can or no you can't. And that's a pretty tall order for somebody to. If a mixer uses a certain flavoring, there's a reason that they use that flavoring. He's probably went through 5, 6, 7, 8 different apples, maybe all of them, and he picked that Capella Double Apple for that recipe. It's best if you can just bite the bullet and buy that flavoring if you're going to do that. Now, some things, yes, you can sub. Okay, let's take for instance sweetener. Cap super sweet, TFA sweetener. Yes, you can substitute it. You just double the TFA. That's simple. There's probably some other flavorings out there. I know there is that you can sub, but to pick out certain flavorings and say yes, 100% sure you could sub this. That's a pretty tall order to really come suggest different flavorings as substitutes. You really just have to do that yourself.
For instance, let me give this example. Suppose you want to make a strawberry cheesecake, and the mixer made the recipe with Capella sweet strawberry, and the guy only has TPA strawberry ripe. Okay, they will be both strawberry cheesecakes, but they will be completely different because um, strawberry ripe is completely different from Capella's sweet strawberry.
Exactly. So when I have a lot of people when I post a recipe, I've had several people say, "Well, can I substitute this for that?" My standard answer is absolutely you can, but it won't be the same recipe.
Do it
Because
at your own risk.
Yeah, but I also say, hey, try it. It might be better. So that's really all that you can really say about subbing different flavors. I wish there was a better answer for you, but there's really not. If we were to sit down and say, okay, here's 20 flavorings that you can sub for 20 other flavorings, that would be quite a challenge to try to do because, those flavorings in different recipes will do different things,
And also one thing to add on to that, when you say subbing flavors for different flavors, I mean, when you go out there and you actually ask somebody, hey, can I this flavor for another flavor? What if the mixer that mixed up that recipe does not have that flavor that you want to sub it for? So they've never tried it out before.
Right. Yeah.
So now they're sitting there like,
I don't know. Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah.
I mean, because I've had people sit there and ask me, hey, have you tried this flavor? You should sub out this flavor. You should do this. You should do that. And I'm just like, I don't even know what you just now said.
I can give this example. From my early days, I always preferred the TPA Graham cracker clear to Capella's Graham cracker, for instance. And every time I wanted to mix a recipe that the mixer had Capella's Graham cracker, I always subbed it with TPA's Graham cracker clear. No problem. Okay, it would be slightly different than the mixer wanted it to be. But this way, it probably would suit more my flavor That what really matters, because when you're mixing, the most important client is yourself. So you should do it with what you want. Don't be afraid to sub something and it will be different. Okay, it will be different, but it might be more suitable to your taste, and that's what really matters.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you know, you're mixing for yourself, and unless you're mixing for a company or something, you know, who cares if it suits your taste? Yeah, absolutely sub. If there's one flavor in a recipe that's like, I just hate that flavoring, but I really like this other flavoring that's very very similar from another company. Yes, sub it, and you know, make it your own. You might actually make it better for you because you know you won't be vaping that one flavor that you don't like. There is one thing that I want to say about subbing though that kind of gets under my skin just a little bit. Is that when somebody posts a recipe and somebody mixes it, you know, and it's on all the flavors, and somebody mixes it up and reviews it, but they've subbed it with a different flavoring, and then they don't necessarily have a really great review of that recipe. You know, I don't think that they should be subbing flavorings and then critiquing that recipe with that sub flavor. You know, if you're going to review a recipe, you should absolutely use the flavors that the mixer used.
Yeah,
So that's just my little 2 cents worth.
That's more like
Okay.
$2.
I'm sorry, what?
That's more like $2.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Any other questions in the chat? Versale, Lewis, Russell.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Well, I guess I will send us out. Don't forget to go over to Bull City Flavors. Use coupon code DMC6. Get 6% off of your order. $75 and over. You get free shipping. Also, head over to Liquid Barn and pick up your nicotine, your PG, VG. They also have some good concentrates over there as well. I know the vanilla bean ice cream or vanilla ice cream that they have is really good. And if you use coupon code Mixers Crew, you get 15% off. Over $50, you get free shipping. And so that's it, guys. Check out our Discord. Let me throw this up in the chat right quick. If you're not a part of the Discord, please join, guys. There's a lot of really knowledgeable people in there. We've got a Facebook group. Check that out. We also have a Twitter account now. If you want to follow us or tweet us, head on over to that. I'm also going to post the recipe development, or what? Yeah, the page that I brought up earlier, the blueprinting. I'm sorry.
And guys, remember, you less than a week for you to show us what you've done, what you've been doing with apples.
That's right. That's right. March the 4th, I believe. Is that the Sunday? When we're going to look at it, critique them.
Yes, March. Yeah, the 4th. Yes.
Okay, March 4th. Yeah. So get your apple recipes out there. Post them on Facebook. If you want to, you can post them in our Discord channel under recipes. We'll check them out. Don't forget to watch DMC live this Sunday at 4:30 Eastern Standard Time. I don't know what we're going to be doing, but it's going to be fun, I'm sure.
Yeah. Question: Am
Yes.
I allowed to enter into this apple?
Sorry.
Everybody is.
Which apple do y'all want?
That's totally up to you. It's just anything apple. It can be, it could be the main profile. It can be an accent, whatever you want to do.
You could
And I can
even
blend
mix
apples.
a recipe with 4% flavor arts Fuji apple. Okay.
There you go. Or you can make an apple recipe without using apple. Yeah, maybe use something else like quince or something like that. As long as you think that it's an apple or you call it an apple, I mean, obviously it's got to have some kind of apple in it. Some kind of flavor.
You could do it even more difficult. making an apple using only pineapples.
Yeah, I don't think that. Well, there's apple in pineapple, but that's not what we're going for.
But I can only drop one recipe.
As many as you want.
Yeah, I mean, what we try to do is we try to get all the flavorings and mix all the recipes up so that we can showcase them on the show on Sunday. So if you're putting out 5 recipes, I don't know if I'm gonna mix all 5 of them. I might pick like 1 or 2 of the ones that I want to mix up, but we'll try to get as many of them mixed up as we can.
The only thing you can't do is bribe the jury.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll talk offline.
You can always send me some of those samples of Flavor. So
you want Flavor?
No, I've got them all.
You want
most
the
of them. I just want more of that yam. That's what I want. That's some good shit, Flavor yam.
I think
mark my word. Come fall this year, everybody will be using it.
I got 2 bottles of yam now.
Yeah. Okay, guys. I think that's about it. Is there anything else that I need to say? Except
just goodbye.
Okay. Thanks for coming out, guys. We'll see y'all later.
See you next Sunday. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.